Αγαπητοί συνάδελφοι, φίλες και φίλοι, καλώς ήρθατε και αυτή τη Δευτέρα το απόγευμα στην 10η διάλεξη του δεύτερου κύκλου Διαλέξεων για τη Διαμεσολάβηση που διοργανώνει η Ελληνική Ένωση Διαμεσολαβητών σε συνεργασία με τον ΟΠΕΜΕΔ, όπως ξέρετε. Ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ για τη συμμετοχή σας. Από ό,τι βλέπω, είστε πάντοτε οι ίδιοι πιστοί στην παρακολούθηση αυτών των διαλέξεων που έχουν γίνει πλέον μία συνήθεια, ελπίζω καλή, τις Δευτέρες το απόγευμα. Τώρα έχει αλλάξει και η ώρα. Εν πρώτη σας εύχομαι καλή εβδομάδα. Ελπίζω να έχετε προσαρμοστεί στην αλλαγή της ώρας. Τώρα είναι πιο ευχάριστα διότι είναι μέρα. Και ελπίζω όλων η διάθεσή μας να είναι καλή για να ακούσουμε σήμερα την κυρία Gunn, η οποία θα μας μιλήσει για πάρα πολύ ενδιαφέροντα θέματα και για εμπειρίες τις οποίες έχει συναποκομίσει από τη δική της δραστηριότητα, η οποία είναι εξαιρετικά μεγάλη. Πριν σας παρουσιάσω την κυρία Gunn, όπως κάνω συνήθως, θα σας πω μερικά πράγματα για εμάς, τους Έλληνες διαμεσολαβητές. Είναι ευχής έργων που τώρα, μετά από τον νόμο 4640 του 2019, ο δρόμος αρχίζει σιγά σιγά να ανοίγει για τη διαμεσολάβηση. Εν πολλοίς οφείλεται αυτό στο ότι μια πολύ μεγάλη κατηγορία υποθέσεων, ουσιαστικά μπορώ να πω όλες οι υποθέσεις, σχεδόν, εκτός από εκείνες που υπάγονται στην εκούσια δικαιοδοσία, για όλες τις υπόλοιπες υποθέσεις, σχεδόν αφού μιλάμε για όλες τις υποθέσεις τακτικής διαδικασίας πολυμελούς, χρειάζεται να γίνει υποχρεωτική αρχική πρώτη συνεδρία διαμεσολάβησης. Αυτή είναι μια ευκαιρία για να πάρουν μια γεύση οι ενδιαφερόμενοι από την διαμεσολάβηση, του τι είναι διαμεσολάβηση, in situ, δηλαδή επιτόπου, και εάν απορρίψουν την διαμεσολάβηση ως μέσο επίλυσης της διαφοράς τους, της συγκεκριμένης, και δεν προχωρήσει η ΑΣ, σταματήσει εκεί, το πράττουν αυτό εν γνώση του τι εγκαταλείπουν. Άλλο είναι να έχω βιώσει μια συνεδρία και να έχω δει εν της πράγμαση πώς πηγαίνουν οι καταστάσεις, πώς μπορούν να εξελιχθούν, τι μπορεί να γίνει. Πρώτον απ' όλα να δω τον αντίδικο, να δω το άλλο μέρος, να δω το πρόσωπό του. Έχει συμβεί άνθρωποι να έχουν σφοδρή αντιδικία, να μην έχουν ειδωθεί ποτέ, να βρεθούν γύρω από ένα τραπέζι διαμεσολάβησης και να πει ο ένας στον δικηγόρο του σε ένα διάλειμμα που έγινε, ο αντίδικος δεν μοιάζει να είναι και τόσο κακός, ενώ μέχρι πριν τον θεωρούσε ως ένα άτομο απορριπταίο και καθόλου προσεγγίσιμο. Αυτό λοιπόν είναι ο βασικός σκοπός της ΙΑΣ, είναι να επιτρέψει στους ενδιαφερόμενους να προσεγγίσουν τη διαμεσολάβηση και στόχος είναι να συνεχίσουν τη διαμεσολάβηση και να προχωρήσουν στην εκούσια διαμεσολάβηση, στην πλήρη διαδικασία, προκειμένου να λύσουν τη διαφορά τους με τον καλύτερο και τον ειρηνικότερο τρόπο. Γιατί είναι τόσο σημαντική η διαμεσολάβηση? Ακριβώς για το λόγο που σας είπα πριν. Δίνει την ευκαιρία σε όλους τους ενδιαφερόμενους να δουν ο ένας τον άλλον. Ο Σόλων έλεγε «Μίλησέ μου για να σε δω». Πολύ σημαντικό. Μίλησέ μου όχι για να σε ακούσω, για να σε δω. Αυτό πρέπει να έχουμε κατά νου και να προσπαθούμε, όπως σας λέω κάθε φορά τις τελευταίες φορές, ελπίζω να μην σας κουράζω, αλλά εγώ θα συνεχίσω, σας το λέω, διότι θεωρώ ότι είναι υποχρέωσή μου αυτή. Πρέπει να εμβαθύνουμε στη διαμεσολάβηση, να δούμε τις ρίζες της, τις πραγματικές, να δούμε τους πραγματικούς της στόχους και να την αξιοποιήσουμε προς όφελος όλων των ανθρωπίνων σχέσεων, όλης της κοινωνίας εν τέλει. Μετά από αυτή την εισαγωγή, θα σας παρουσιάσω την κυρία Gunn, η οποία, όπως θα δείτε, είναι μια πολύ ευχάριστη κυρία, αλλά σιδηρά κυρία. Είναι Αγγλίδα και έχει από πού να πάρει. Είναι λοιπόν εξειδικευμένη στην επίλυση διαφορών, είναι διαπιστευμένη διαμεσολαβήτρια και οι πελάτες της την γνωρίζουν ως the barefoot mediator, η ξυπόλητη διαμεσολαβήτρια. Jane, would you please, first of all, welcome again, and thank you again for having accepted my invitation to be here today with us for this presentation, which I'm sure will be very interesting for all of us. So would you please explain or tell the story why you are called the barefoot mediator?
I will, Catherine. Thank you so much. And, you know, it's a real pleasure and honor to be with you in Athens again, sort of. I was trying to remember, and Sergio and I were thinking how far back it was when I last visited. I've been twice to Athens at your invitation, Catherine, and I remember coming with Thierry Garbi to advanced training, and then I came with the UIA, the Union of International Advocates, to one of the meetings a few years ago. So I wish I was with you personally today, but I'm not. But it's a real pleasure to be with you again. So thank you for inviting me. And so the Barefoot Mediator comes really out of the COVID crisis, out of lockdown, because it's quite a warm day here in the UK today. And I've been, during lockdown, which started here in this time last year in March, I was doing all my mediation work and my presentations with no shoes on. So I made a joke, you know, building rapport to my parties to say, oh, I have no shoes on today, I'm the barefoot mediator. And then the next day or later that day, I was in an event rather like this, and I got introduced as this barefoot mediator. And so I thought, well, I wonder what that is. And those of you that know me will know that one of the things I've been really passionate about, and indeed what this talk tonight is about, is how can we use the mediation skills that we have in the wider context, in society, in our own lives, not just in commercial mediation and in legal matters. So I thought then that what barefoot mediation is, and I looked at where the term barefoot comes from. It comes from the term barefoot doctors, and in China, the barefoot doctors were where the people who lived in the rural communities couldn't get to the hospitals. They were the farmers, or the people who worked on the land, were given some training, rather like paramedics, to be doctors, barefoot doctors, available in the local community to help people. So I thought that's what I would love to create, is a tribe of barefoot mediators, people who are in their own communities, whether it be their family or their workplace or their home community, with the essence of mediation, the barefoot skills of mediation. So my passion is that we should all as mediators be able to spread these skills to the communities we live and work in. And that's part of what my theme of tonight's talk will be, Catherine. So thank you for asking me to explain that.
Thank you very much, Jane. A very interesting story, and I really admire you of your intentions and your goodwill and the pleasure you take in offering to people your knowledge and help people solving their problems in a peaceful way. Thank you very much, Jane.
Thank you, Catherine. Well, I should explain that by marriage, I'm part of a Scottish clan. We call it a clan. I'm part of a Scottish family. So my husband's name is Gunn, and you may know, some of you, that in Scotland, the men wear kilts made of woolen material. Anyway, so there's two things about that. One is we have a family motto, which is in Latin, it's aut pax aut bellum, without either peace or war. So that happens to be our family motto. And then again, I say in our family, my husband wears the skirt and I wear the trousers. So this is
what is his reaction?
Well, depends whether he's wearing his gear. They're quite a fierce clan, actually, the Gunn clan. So, and it's no mean feat to wear a kilt. I have to tell you, they're very heavy. So, there's a couple of anecdotes for you.
Yes, they are very interesting. So I continue your presentation, Jane, by saying, you allow me to introduce you in Greek.
Yes.
Η κυρία Jane Gunn είναι πρόεδρος της Διοικούσας Επιτροπής του Chartered Institute of Arbitrators of London, του CARB. Πολλοί από εμάς, όχι από εσάς τους νεότερους που έχετε εκπαιδευτεί τώρα, από εμάς τους παλαιότερα εκπαιδευτέντες, έχουμε εκπαιδευτεί από το Chartered Institute of Arbitrators of London, του οποίου είμαστε και μέλη οι περισσότεροι. Υπήρξε μέλος του Διοικητικού Συμβουλίου του Civil Mediation Council of England and Wales και από του χρόνου, το 2022, η κυρία Jane Gunn θα είναι πρόεδρος του Chartered Institute of Arbitrators of London. Πέραν της τεράστιας δραστηριότητάς της, πραγματικά πάρα πολύ μεγάλης, εντυπωσιακά μεγάλης, ως διαμεσολαβήτριας, έχει συγγράψει 2 βιβλία. Ο τίτλος του ενός είναι «How to beat Bedlam in the boardroom and boredom in the bedroom». Jane, please, you explain because it is very, very interesting.
More explanation. Okay, so let me show you. This is a book. I actually wrote it, I think, in 2009, but it's still very popular. And the title, as Catherine says, is How to Beat Bedlam in the Boardroom and Boredom in the Bedroom. I wrote this book because I was working with groups of senior leaders, chief executives and senior team leaders. And when they came to me, they would say, well, we do have a problem in the boardroom, but we also have a problem at home. You know, we're dealing with our teenager. We're not getting on terribly well with our partner. And so I said to them, well, it's the same skills. It doesn't matter whether it's a global problem or a corporate problem or something in the home. The mediation skills that we use apply to both. So I wrote this book with stories and case studies that applied to both the bedroom, which is the home life, and the boardroom, which is the work life, to show that the two are interlinked. And I think now that we've all been in lockdown, more than ever, our lives, our work and our home lives are completely intertwined. One of the first blogs I wrote was, I married you for life and not for lunch. We're having to deal with this intertwining of our business and our work lives more than anything. So yes, I'll give a link to you at the end. I think on the last slide there's a link where you can actually download a copy of the book if you'd be interested.
Oh yes, with pleasure. Thank you very much. Το άλλο βιβλίο της κυρίας Jane Gunn έχει τίτλο The Authority Guide to Conflict Resolution. Η κυρία Jane Gunn έχει μιλήσει, έχει κάνει ομιλία στα Ηνωμένα Έθνη, στο Λευκό Οίκο και στην Ευρωπαϊκή Επιτροπή. Καθώς ο κόσμος μας αλλάζει και όλο και περισσότερο γίνεται δύσκολη η κατάσταση την οποία αντιμετωπίζουμε σήμερα λόγω της πανδημίας, λόγω της ανισότητας μεταξύ των φυλών, λόγω όλων των προβλημάτων των οικονομικών, της αλλαγής του κλίματος και όλα τα υπόλοιπα τα οποία λίγο πολύ όλοι βιώνουμε καθημερινά, και όπως παρατηρούμε και έχουμε την ευκαιρία να ακούμε στα δελτία ειδήσεων, τα οποία τελικά γίνονται αστυνομικά δελτία, όλες οι αξιόπινες πράξεις αυξάνονται, υπάρχει συνεχώς μεγαλύτερη ανασφάλεια, υπάρχει συνεχώς ο λιγότερος χρόνος για να επικεντρωθούμε στον εαυτό μας, γιατί πρέπει να αντιμετωπίσουμε τις καθημερινές δυσκολίες, και εν ώψη όλων αυτών των προβλημάτων η Jane ρωτάει τι μπορούμε εμείς ως άτομα να κάνουμε για να καταλάβουμε και να τροποποιήσουμε αυτή την κατάσταση σύγκρουσης που υπάρχει σήμερα στον κόσμο, δηλαδή μεταξύ των θέλω μας και των είμαι υποχρεωμένος να κάνω. Άλλη ερώτηση την οποία θέτει η Jane είναι, είμαστε ήδη έτοιμοι για να κάνουμε να δώσουμε μία βαθύτερη έννοια και ένα βαθύτερο μήνυμα στον κόσμο, πώς μπορούμε να βρούμε αρμονία και ισορροπία σε έναν τρελό κόσμο. Η Jane, όπως καταλάβατε ήδη από όσα είπε η ίδια, θέλει και της αρέσει πολύ, έχει ως στόχο να βοηθάει τον κόσμο σε όλα τα μονοπάτια της ζωής για να μπορέσουν να βελτιωθούν οι άνθρωποι και να ζήσουν καλύτερα. Διδάσκοντάς τους τα βασικά εργαλεία της διαμεσολάβησης, δίνει την ευκαιρία στον κόσμο να εντρυφήσει στις διαφορές και στην διαφορετικότητα με τρόπο που να μην είναι συγκρουσιακός, αλλά επικεντρωμένος στην λύση. Η αποστολή της είναι, όπως είπε η ίδια, να δημιουργήσει barefoot mediators για μικρές ομάδες ανθρώπων και να τους βοηθήσει να αλλάξουν τον τρόπο ζωής τους και να αντιμετωπίσουν τις κρίσεις. Οι στόχοι της μπορεί να είναι υψηλότεροι για τις διαφορές τις επιχειρησιακές. Βασικές αποφάσεις πρέπει να λαμβάνονται κάθε μέρα και οι επιχειρήσεις πρέπει να επιβιώσουν κατά τη διάρκεια εβδομάδων και μηνών. Πρέπει να αντέξουν κάνοντας υπομονή και αντιμετωπίζοντας με ψυχραιμία τις δύσκολες καταστάσεις. Η Jane έχει εργαστεί σε οργανώσεις μεγάλες και μικρές, οι οποίες συμπεριλαμβάνουν Cable and Wireless, the NHS, BAA, Bacardi, Martini, McLaren Racing, the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators, όπως είπαμε πριν, the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors, ACCA και πολλές άλλες. Η Jane σήμερα θα μας μιλήσει με τρόπο διαδραστικό σχετικά με την διαμεσολάβηση από το 2020 και εφ' εξής. Jane, thank you again for being here. We look very much forward to listening to your presentation, and with pleasure I give you the floor.
Thank you so much, Catherine. So, thank you again, everybody, for welcoming me today to Greece to be with you. I like to start my talks at the moment, knowing that everybody is sitting at home, by saying, are you sitting comfortably? Are you sitting comfortably? And the answer is you shouldn't be, because we are living in times of unprecedented change and uncertainty. And so the question I want to ask you this evening, and the question that's really on my mind at the moment, I get my slides to change, is what in this brave new world, how can we apply the mediation skills of listening, of facilitation, of dialogue, and of collaborative problem solving? And as I said in the introduction, how can we apply those beyond as well the boundaries of legal disputes that we are used to dealing with as mediators? And very much, I'd like to address this topic in a short talk, but I'd really like you to be thinking about this and to open this up for a discussion at the end. I'd love to hear your views and really to start some sort of ideas about how we can make this happen. So I explained the background to my book, How to Beat Bedlam in the Boardroom and Boredom in the Bedroom. And just a week ago, I spoke to a corporate client of mine, and this is his story. He said, Jane, I'm really struggling with lockdown. I've got my teenage son trying to work from home. He stays up late. He's smoking in his bedroom. He's not getting his homework done. I'm trying to share the office space with my wife, and we're disagreeing. And on top of that, I have two senior directors who are trying to work from home. They're not getting on very well. They're trying to communicate with email. And we have some really critical business decisions that we have to make, and we've got to decide how we're going to take the business forward this year. And this is just very typical of the kind of challenges that people are coming up with these days, all across the board. So I think the problem more than ever is that people are experiencing tension. We're all experiencing tension in relationships, in business relationships, but also in our home relationships. You know, we are having to communicate with people via Zoom, and we feel kind of zoomed out. We feel quite tired. We do have sometimes tensions with family members. We're having to juggle these things. And, you know, yes, my husband did walk past an open door when I was in a board meeting with a towel around his waist. So we have to be careful of how we present ourselves in our business meetings when we're on Zoom. And a lot of us are dealing with internal conflict created by the times we're living in. And I was having a chat with Catherine and Sergio about how the impact for you in the Greek economy has been with tourism and so on, a huge impact that we're having. And not least for me, not having had my hair cut, we call it COVID hair. I haven't had my hair cut since before Christmas. So we're all struggling with many of these tensions, and they're coming out in many ways, as well as in the workplace. So as a lawyer and as a mediator, I am knowing that what keeps me busy is what keeps my clients, literally is keeping my clients awake at night. And it could be this business disputes with a partner, they've got employment issues with members of staff, they might have breaches of contract. And what's actually happening is that all of these issues are being multiplied and magnified over the last year. And what I find when I'm working with organizations that's quite typical with conflict is that many leaders and many people within organizations leave conflict until it's too late. Until it's too late for them to avoid litigation or avoid losing a member of staff or whatever. And again, you know, my passion is really to try and help organizations to manage their conflicts at a much earlier stage. And in this time of pandemic, in everywhere in the world, as we're living through the crisis, we are expected to experience really much higher numbers of conflicts. So I think there's no more relevant time than now for us to be able to use our skills as mediators in initiating and designing and facilitating dialogue. You know, those are the key skills, the core skills that we have as mediators. And we should be thinking, how can we use those? How can we offer those to our commercial clients to be able to help them through this crisis? And one of the things our clients have to do is to decide how we're going to manage this avalanche. So to the current president of our High Court, our Supreme Court, has said just this last week that they're having to employ, I think, 20 new senior High Court judges. And Lord Phillips, who was one of our senior leader of the Supreme Court, said that he thought there were going to be an avalanche of disputes. So it's been described as an avalanche of disputes and a tsunami of litigation. But in any event, we are expecting, and I'm sure you are in Greece, actually a deluge of more conflicts and more disputes and more conflicts for our clients. And we know here that in the UK, as across Europe, the court systems are experiencing a real backlog of litigation. And so we need, in a sense, to step up and maybe help there. Is there somewhere that we can help, mediation can help to manage that backlog as well? I also think that, as I explained in that case study, what a lot of our clients have got to do is to make decisions. They've got to make decisions about how they manage conflict now and how they manage conflict in the future and how they manage their businesses. And part of what our skills are as mediators is helping our clients to make those decisions themselves. So we, as well as commercial issues, there are some big conversations that are going on in the world right now around other issues. So it could be climate change, it could be race, terrorism, politics, environmental disaster, and even COVID. You know, there are some big conversations around how we should manage this, whether on a global basis or even on a countrywide basis. The strategies that we're adopting are right, and could we have some more discussion and dialogue about those? So again, our skills as mediators are there in these things that we're good at, this initiating, designing and facilitating dialogue, to be able to help or offer to help at many different levels. I was delighted to go to a book launch this last week. Someone called Anna Howard has written a book which came out of a PhD thesis that she wrote called Changing the Frame, Framing the Changes. And Anna's book came out of the idea that when she interviewed senior leaders, senior corporate leaders and senior counsel within organizations, they felt that how mediation was presented to them was not what they were buying or not what they wanted to buy. And so she interviewed many senior corporate people and counsel to say, what is it that you would like mediation to be offering you? And it's too much to tell you the whole basis of her thesis, but really what she came up with is the idea that we perhaps as mediators should be reframing mediation as the basis of being negotiation, not an alternative to litigation. And so instead of it being something where we say, well, you know, litigation, if you go down that route, is going to cost you a lot, it's going to be high risk, it's going to be an adversarial process, you're going to lose control. What she found is that most senior corporate counsels say that, well, we don't often end up in litigation, that is rare, but we do always end up in negotiation, but in face-to-face negotiation, which doesn't always go well. And so maybe, again, at an earlier stage, we as mediators could be offering to help our corporate clients with their negotiation. So Anna Howard said, think of it as assistance to parties in their negotiations. I also made a note here because I was interested in the book launch and I haven't read it yet, but there was a book mentioned by somebody called Tim Hicks called Embodied Conflict. And he was looking again at this decision-making basis and how our cognitive biases determine how our clients and how we approach mediation. And what Tim actually said, and I'm just looking at my notes here, he said, and I really do feel this is a topic that's ripe for discussion. How can we as mediators make a constructive contribution to society with this thing that we call mediation? I have looked at the book Embodied Conflict. I looked at it on Amazon just before I came online, and it's actually very expensive to buy. But I'd like to actually perhaps explore that, and perhaps that could be another topic, is looking at, you know, really how this, how this psychological view of conflict and of embodied conflict, how do people make decisions and what drives that, would be a very interesting topic for me, I know. So I wanted then to just look at, you know, what I've called this talk 2020 Mediation and Beyond. And the reason for that was one of the mentors, one of my gurus in the mediation world has been Michael Leiths of British American Tobacco. Michael Leiths was the corporate counsel at British American Tobacco for many years, and in fact co-hosted many events that we ran there, looking at mediation events. So he's been an advocate of mediation since the very beginning. And a while back, Michael Leiths wrote, in fact, 10 years ago, 10 years ago, last year in 2010, Michael Leiths wrote a paper which was called 2020 Vision, looking ahead to the next 10 years to see where he predicted mediation would be. And it's quite interesting then to look back from 2020 and then beyond to see where have we actually got to with mediation. And just before we do that, having a think at, where did mediation actually start? And I went back to 1979 when the CPR Institute was created in America. Then in 1981, the seminal book, Getting to Yes, on which a lot of our mediation training originally was based, the difference between being positional and looking at the needs and interests of parties. And then in 1983, the Harvard Project on Negotiation was founded. And then in 1990, CEDA, where I did my training, which was one of the first bodies in the UK, certainly, to promote commercial mediation training in the early 1990s. And then it was a new field. And I was very lucky to join in the early 1990s and for that to be part of, for me to be part of the founding of mediation. But it certainly was a new field then, and we had to persuade lawyers, we had to persuade the courts that this was something that was a rigorous process that could sit alongside litigation, that could help lawyers as well as their corporate clients to manage some of their disputes. And so here were the predictions that Michael Leeds gave back in 2010. And it's interesting to see whether this has come to light now, and then to think, what next? So Michael Leeds' predictions were that mediation will no longer be viewed as an alternative form of dispute resolution. In fact, it will be more of a mainstream. And it would be interesting to know at the end how many of you feel that in your own community, mediation is much more of a mainstream process and not viewed as something alternative. I think we are beginning to get there in the UK, but it certainly has been a long journey. My journey with it has been 25 years so far. So all the best things take a long time to mature, but certainly mediation has. Then Michael said, good conflict management will be considered as part of good corporate governance. I think we're getting there, and I've been involved at the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators in a governance review. We're beginning to look at how does that form part of corporate governance. And then Michael Leeds also said companies will design their own systems for evaluating, managing, and resolving conflicts and disputes. Again, that's part of the work I do with businesses. I'm working with a company at the moment where we are helping them to design their own conflict management system that can sit inside their business alongside any litigation strategies, alongside any HR and complaint systems that they have that can help them to manage some of those by having a real framework. And looking then at what some of the current challenges are, where we've got to, Michael Leeds did review his paper and said, mediation, and which I'm talking about today, the use of mediation will extend beyond dispute resolution. So instead of just being embodied within organizations, perhaps it will be able to move out beyond those boundaries of corporate life into other areas. Some of these big discussions that we need to have as a society, can we as mediators help to facilitate those and offer our skills? And also that negotiation, mediation and collaboration skills will routinely be offered as part of core education in schools. It's one of the things I'm trying to do with the Barefoot Mediation Initiative, is to say, let's educate everybody in these basic core skills of mediation. And a couple of examples, way back in 1995, at the same time as I was training as a mediator, I took part in something called the Tomorrow's Company Inquiry and an organisation called the RSA, the Royal Society of Arts, Manufacturers and Commerce here in the UK. And it was funded and founded by the chief executives of 25 PLCs, public limited companies. And they were looking at how the best organizations would be operating in the future. Now, one of the key things they found, which I found really interesting, and in fact was one of the things that propelled me into mediation, was that this adversarial approach to relationships, not even conflict per se, but the adversarial approach to relationships was one of the key things holding businesses back from operating at their highest level, their highest potential. And so if you could work with an organization, not only on helping them resolve their litigation or their disputes or their conflicts, but understanding how this inbuilt adversarial approach to relationships at the human resources level sometimes stops companies operating at the highest level, then we could really help our economies to be more productive than they are now. Another example of that was in the US, where a Business Roundtable, which I think had the commitment of about 81 CEOs, and they said that they would be putting stakeholder dialogue, in other words, all the relationships that a company has with all its stakeholders, would be the most important thing, and it would keeping those relationships operating well, again, would be one of the most important factors of an organization. That again sat at the heart of the Tomorrow's Company inquiry, that it's the stakeholder dialogue and the stakeholder relationships that are also very important in creating our sound and sustainable economies. And then another example I like to give, and I can give Catherine the link later because I have interviewed PD Villarreal. So PD Villarreal was the corporate counsel of EDS. Again, someone who's been a mentor and a guru to me, because way back again in the 1990s, PD Villarreal had put conflict management at the heart of his company and created a strategy for that. If you'd like me to provide Catherine with the link to a podcast interview with PD Villarreal, I can do that. But really very interesting to think how way back in the 1990s, both Michael Leeds and PD Villarreal within their corporate structures were beginning to think about how some of these things could happen in corporate life. So thinking then about mediation in the future, what are some of the things that make me excited about the future of mediation? One of the things is actually Zoom. I was not excited about mediating on Zoom. I thought really I like to be with parties. I like to share chocolate with them. Catherine may remember I'm a chocoholic, but I love to be in the room with parties and to be sharing the experience with them. So I was very skeptical that mediation on Zoom would work, but it does work. And in many ways, one of my first mediations last year in lockdown was working with a company in France. And I was able to work with two directors without having to get on the Eurostar. But the other thing that I found I'm able to do online is to break the mediation down, because we're not traveling. We don't have to be in the same place. We don't have to do it all in one day. We can think much more about this designing of the mediation process. Do we want everything to happen all in one session? Or would in some cases it work better if we had shorter sessions and enabled people to go away and think about what they'd learnt? I call it the incubation period, to have some time to think about conflict, what's going on, particularly in situations where there is or could be an ongoing relationship, and then to come back and pick up the mediation later. So it gives us an opportunity to really be designing what we mean by conflict resolution or mediation, or maybe not even giving it that label at all. And for me, it's also, I'm able to mix in some of my skills of conflict coaching, of consultancy, to help the organization think not only about that situation or conflict that they've got there, but how can they learn from that? How can they integrate some new thinking into the organization? So I'm quite excited about using online mediation, and what other opportunities do we think? Well, online training, again, has been something that is really exciting. You know, we can reach more people, and, you know, even today being here, I know Catherine has this being recorded, and we also are live on Facebook. So there is an opportunity to reach more people in other countries. And whilst it's lovely to come and be with you, it's also wonderful to be able to reach out with some of these training opportunities to more people. And so that's another one of the things that I think is very exciting. And I have actually created, and I've put a link in at the end of the notes, this barefoot mediation course, and I'm able to offer that to people all over the world. And so I've got one senior leadership team going through that now, and I've got a cohort of individuals that are starting in April. So it does open up enormous opportunities. And again, I'd be really interested and excited to hear what you think when we get to the end, in where you see the opportunities for you as mediators. So just thinking about then the future and beyond mediation, what I've come up with, or I found, was this list of skills that I think actually all leaders, politicians, everybody could do with using these skills, which are the skills that we learn as mediators. And they are these. We practice, or we help people with this mediation, meeting, initiation, design and facilitation. That's one of the things we offer. Issue analysis and outcome definition. We help our clients to understand what are the core issues, where do they want to go, what are the outcomes, where are they trying to get to. One of the things I think clients find most challenging is to understand where they want to get to. Curiosity, we help our clients to explore things, and we help them to tell their stories, which helps them to get things into context. The other thing which we help people with, and which I think everybody could do with, integrating into the way they manage conflicts and situations and challenges, is curiosity and is emotional and social intelligence. This is the thing of understanding, where does conflict come from for us? Could we better manage some of these situations? Could we better manage people? Complex problem solving, again, is something that we do automatically as mediators. Can we teach that to people? Can we teach people how to see the different options that they have, how to compare the outcomes from those different options, how to make those decisions? A lot of this is about decision making. Then creativity, intuition and visionary thinking. And the thing that's really core in the times we're living in today is this resilience and perseverance. Everybody needs to have that integrated into how they operate. And we can help people with many of these skills because they're things that we have learnt as mediators. So looking to the future then, I wonder what comes next. And I like to think of where we are now as the next revolution, maybe. So thinking back, what are the revolutions that we've been through? We've been through the physical revolution, we call that the Big Bang. We went through then the biological revolution, that was evolution. Then the agricultural revolution, where we changed the way we grew and produced food, the industrial revolution. And then the information technology revolution, or the technological revolution, which to some extent we think we are still in. Everything is changing, and through lockdown we've had to embrace technology. And the gaps between those revolutions have become even shorter. In the beginning it was billions or millions and then hundreds of years, but now we're talking in decades or even years. And if we think how quickly we've transformed in just a year. So the question is, what comes next? And I don't really know what I call it, but I've called it here the consciousness revolution. And I think that's because what we experience now, and even looking at COVID, we have to look at data and predictions and all sorts of things. Technology has become quite dominant in our lives. And I know in many of the ways in our governments are deciding, should we be in lockdown or should we be out of lockdown? They're looking at predictions and statistics. But there is more to us than that as humans. And there's another book which I've found very interesting called More Human. I'm trying to remember the name of the author. Again, I can give Catherine a reference to it. But More Human is a book which looked at when we're making these decisions, and particularly when governments are making their decisions, we need to take into account how humans behave. And humans are not always rational, they're irrational. And so we need to think about, how does human behavior and how does the human outcome, what human beings will actually do with these decisions, also drive how we make decisions. And so I think where I'm coming from, and where I'm coming from as the barefoot mediator, is to say, We now know a lot more, as Tim Hicks is thinking about in his book, about how the human brain operates. And that's what's fascinating. You know, how do we actually, as individuals, what is our experience of conflict? How we've experienced conflict in the past, in our childhood, in our school life, in our families, how does that influence us as mediators? How does it influence our clients? What is their experience of conflict? And how do they come through that? So we need to understand the inner workings of the human being. And all of that is now available to us. There's much, much more information available to us about how the human brain works and how sensations and emotions work than there ever was before. And I've always been interested in these 3 levels of development of mediators, but it can apply to any professional. So if you think about your mediator training or any profession, as a lawyer, for example, the first thing you do is you probably go on some training and you learn the core skills as a lawyer, as a doctor, an accountant, or a mediator. So you do your mediation training course and you learn the core skills of listening, of questioning, of analyzing needs and interests. All of those skills we learn as mediators. And then level number 2 is, let's put those skills into context. Let's put them into practice. Let's do a mediation. And we begin to see that it's much more complex than we thought, that actually mediating does involve some challenges with the humans, with different things than we'd experience. So we start to experience putting the skills into context. But the 3rd level of development for us as mediators, and I believe for any professional or anybody actually, is this level of consciousness or self-awareness. How do I become more aware of myself, of my skills, of my attributes, and the impact that those make, whether for better or worse, in the context of the work that I do as a mediator? So this level of awareness of ourselves comes into play and is important. And this is very much what I'm teaching my Barefoot Mediator course. How can we become more self-aware of what drives us as mediators? And I think this is really important to think about what is the next level of development for us and how can we put that into context. So I wanted to mention just a couple of things before I finish. One of the things that really did inspire me again to be a mediator was way back again around the same time, I think, as all these things were happening in the early 1990s. I went to my library to get a recipe book, and another book fell on my head. It was a hardback book, and it was this book called Love, Medicine and Miracles by Dr. Bernie Siegel. Now, Dr. Bernie Siegel is in fact a US cancer doctor. I think he's retired now, but what he says in the book is that he became disillusioned with his work as a doctor, as a cancer doctor, because he was seeing his patients very much as, you know, a body, as a disease, as a statistic. And he said, if I can't look at my patient, as the whole human being, if I can't understand what's going on for them in their lives that's brought them to me as a patient, then I'm not being a good doctor. So he adopted what I might call a holistic approach, but looking at the whole person, or the needs and interests, the fears and concerns of his patients. And even at that time, I wonder if he can do that as a doctor, I wonder if we can do that as mediators. Can we bring this holistic approach to our clients' legal disputes and start to look at the whole picture? So that was one of the inspirations to me. So looking at this level of self-awareness, I've become very interested in some of the advanced training that I run, in looking at what else can we learn about ourselves as mediators that can inspire us to be better mediators. One of the things I did, every year I have for the past few years run an advanced mediation course for an association here called the Association of Northern Mediators, and we have gone on a retreat. And each year I invite a guest presenter, and one of the years I invited someone called Mark DeLissa. Now, Mark DeLissa is a gospel singer, He's a voice coach, and we ran a session called The Power of Participation and the Value of Voice. And through singing, actually, and voice, we explored where do people's voice come from in mediation? What happens if someone is afraid to speak? They don't want to speak up. They don't know how to speak up. So all of these things can be explored through things which are outside the formal frame that we might say of legal or mediation training. Other things that I've explored are improvisational theatre. What to do when you don't know what to do is another workshop I've run. How do you react when there is no script? Again, I'm happy to let Catherine have some things that I've written and thought about on this. Clowning, for example. So there are many things in the creative sphere that we as mediators can allow to stretch ourselves beyond our comfort zone and learn about ourselves as mediators and become better mediators. So I think what I'm saying is that what's happened, and I think what somebody else said to me, is that there's a technological evolution, and perhaps that's overtaken the evolution of compassion and the spiritual evolution. You know, we mustn't leave those things behind in our race to technology. And the thing I feel that sits at the heart of our experience as mediators, that we must never lose sight of, is stories. You know, the real power of human stories, whether that's in Brexit, which we've had to experience in the UK recently, COVID-19, you know, human stories sit at the heart of our experience. And I started with a story. So perhaps the most important, the most potent factor on earth is still people's stories. So to summarize, I think really we have a huge opportunity as mediators to understand the breadth of our passion for mediation, the skills that we've learnt, and where we could apply those beyond the formal mediation framework. I think we can use our skills and knowledge of mediation to help people, organizations, and even nations in time of crisis to have these big conversations, and that the human attributes of connection, of values, of story, and the need to build culture, whether that's in an organization, in other communities, is really important. So I think this sort of sense of community, of the human values, sits at the heart of being beyond technology. So just to finish off then, I like this quote very much by President John F. Kennedy. We stand today on the edge of a new frontier, but the new frontier of which I speak is not a set of promises. It is a set of challenges. And so I return to where I began to say, let us as mediators not sit comfortably, because there is a challenge to take up. And that challenge is one where we educate, where we guide, where we challenge ourselves as well as others to apply the mediation skills that we have in the future, in this uncertain world that we live in. And I think, as I'm always saying, that it's up to us. We kind of think that the world's out of our control at the moment, but I think it's up to us, to all of us, to decide what kind of world we want and how we're going to shape it. And perhaps we in mediators can help to guide that discussion about what even the future of our whole global society might be. So Catherine, thank you once again for inviting me. Here's a final slide. If you would like to contact me, the download thing there, that will give you access to a free e-copy of my book, and also some mini videos I made last year, thinking they'd be short-lived, some videos for looking at in times of change, challenge and crisis. But with that link, you can have a look at some mini videos. The other link then there is, if anybody is at all interested in the Barefoot Mediation course, or you know anybody who would be, is the link there. So I will stop sharing my slides so that I can see all of you now, and I'd love to hear any questions or any discussion that we can create out of this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you again very much, Jane. Your presentation was excellent, very interesting, because it is not only professional, but it touches our feelings and what we have to have in mind to become better humans, better members of the community, better professionals. But this is the last. For me, the first is to become better persons.
Yes.
Better people in the community, and to help each other, especially in hard times as the one we are faced to at present. Thank you very much, Jane. After our colleagues will put their questions, I will ask you also, I will put a question, and also I will remind you something I remember from the course of advanced mediation, which you have taught here in Athens a few years ago. Thank you again, Jane.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you so much. So I'm really, I know there's some comments in the chat box, so I haven't looked at those yet, but I'm happy to take some of those, or and generally just to take your questions. So I'm just having a quick look. Getting to Yes is the book Beyond Reason. Somebody's mentioning there. I like Maria's comment. We need to be humble, first of all. I agree with that as well. So any other questions, please, rather than put them in the chat, just address them to me. That would be wonderful. And your thoughts really on how we can actually, you know, make this happen. How can we use our skills as mediation in this extraordinary times we're living in?
I would like you, can I speak?
Vicky, yes, hello Vicky.
Hello.
Hi.
It's really been a pleasure listening to you, and I really enjoyed your humane approach to this big issue, the mediation. We stuck on formality and we miss the point. And I think it's very valuable to recognize that above all, we are humans and we have to approach the other part, whoever it is, with a more human way. But here in Greece, I think we miss, and we are a little bit far away from that, we miss the culture of this approach.
Yes.
We have a lot of work to do on that. But,
I think we all do, Vicky. I mean, you know, it's I think it's a journey. We must see it as a journey. You know, I think all of us are you know, and I think the world generally, and each different culture and each culture within. So don't forget that every family in itself and every organization has its own culture. So we're always talking about different cultures, and those cultures, you know, often clash. Even if you think about, you know, getting married and then you have to discuss with your husband, how do you do Christmas in your house? And how do you do Christmas? You know, we have clashes of cultures the whole time. And so I think, you know, understanding how to create culture and how to blend cultures is another thing that we have to explore. And, you know, one of the things I'm doing with organizations is getting them to really understand where culture comes from, and think about, so where has your culture come from? What has created it, and was it consciously created? Because many times, whether our culture is a family culture or an organizational culture, it's just evolved. We haven't consciously made that culture. So being able to think, well, what do we actually want here? How do we really want to behave towards each other, for example? even in my job as chair of the board of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators, you know, we had to think about what are our core values in an organization. And at every level, how do we think about applying those? If it's in a board meeting, if it's in another meeting, if it's in a presentation, are we clear that we're showing those values to the world? And I think sometimes we don't do that consciously. So again, you know, this consciousness is not something that's kind of airy-fairy. It's about, are we doing things deliberately and consciously? Thank you, Vicky.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Questions, conversations? Christina, I see you there. Hello, Christina. Margarita, I remember you. Some familiar names and people here, which is lovely. And do we have any questions coming in from Facebook at all, Catherine? Do we?
There is a comment from Dinos Theodoridis in Zoom. He says, I think that the key issue we as mediators have to deal with is education, 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 and practice, practice, and practice again.
Yes, yes, I agree.
And activate our skills.
Yes.
So you want to mention something about that?
Yes, well, I agree. I mean, I think, you know, even as a mediator with 25 years experience, we mustn't forget, we shouldn't forget that we are all still learning. You know, we're not experts. And I don't know if you remember or if we did it with you, Catherine, but the ladder of learning, some of you may have done the ladder of learning when you did your training, but where we start out, again, it's this conscious thing. We start out with unconscious incompetence. We don't know what we don't know. Then we get to conscious incompetence. Now I know that I don't know how to do it. Then we get to conscious competence. I'm doing it, I'm practicing it, but I have to think about it. And then we get to unconscious competence. I'm now doing it much more automatically. And anything we learn, whether it's riding a bike or skiing or something difficult, we go up that ladder until hopefully we get to unconscious competence. But a bit like the game we have here in the UK, Snakes and Ladders, it's very easy to slip back down to the bottom again if we become too complacent, and we can slip back down again and become unconsciously incompetent. So we have to be always learning, and we have to be always thinking, and we have to be always conscious about, how am I being perceived by others? How am I operating? Am I being my best self? Am I practicing my best skills? And am I still learning about mediation? You know, it's not a 5-day course and then we put it in a box and we practice it. We have to be consciously exploring that from our own perspective the whole of our lives. And Catherine, you'll probably remember my talk, one of the talks at the UIA, talking about us being mediators, not doing mediation. Yes. Very much, we have to sort of become mediators. We are, in the end, we are being mediators, not doing mediation. And that's for me, that's the core distinction of this conscious approach.
I fully agree.
Yes, thank you. Catherine, you said you had something you wanted to mention from the advanced training.
But I'm waiting for other colleagues who have questions, I think. Sergio?
No, on Facebook we have about 20, 30 congratulations and greetings, but no question.
Oh.
We have many congratulations on Zoom also.
Yes, I can see them on Zoom.
That's very nice. Okay. So
I can put my question.
Yes,
please do.
Correct? Sergio, can I?
Yes, you can.
Okay, thank you. So Jane, if I'm correct, what you apply is transformative mediation.
Yes.
It is correct? I would like very much you to explain us what is really transformative mediation and why do you prefer it?
Yes, thank you.
What are the advantages?
Thank you, Catherine. So yes, having trained as in facilitative mediation, rather late in my career as a mediator, I went on a course in transformative mediation. I think I did that in Croatia, and I went on a course, and This comes from the book, The Promise of Mediation by Robert Bush and Joseph, remember the name now, but I can give you the resource. So the premise of transformative mediation, many people misunderstand. They think, oh, I'm trying to transform the parties or transform their relationship. Transformative mediation, at its heart, is about how do we transform the interaction between the parties as it's happening from moment to moment. So the understanding, again, it goes back to what is the party's experience of conflict at the moment they're in. And most parties' experience of conflict is that it's a negative experience, that it plunges them into a state, a mental state, where they feel weak and self-absorbed. So it's a state of weakness and self-absorption. Self-absorption means I'm completely absorbed in my own story. I can't see or hear anything else. And weakness generally means that the way the parties behave towards each other is in a way that's defensive, and a way that could be adversarial. Some of the behaviors that we have experienced ourselves in parties. So that's the state that most parties experience of conflict is. It plunges them into the state of weakness and self-absorption. So the idea of transformative mediation is that our job as mediators is to help the parties themselves to make a shift from feeling weak to feeling empowered, to feeling more empowered within the mediation. Again, this idea of finding your voice that I explored with Mark Delesser is very important. And recognition, to be able to, instead of being self-absorbed, to be able to recognize and appreciate where the other party is coming from, even if you don't agree with it. And so our job as mediators, if we can help the parties to shift to feeling more empowered and recognizing the other party, they will be in a stronger position to be able to do what we call self-determination. They will be empowered to make their own decisions. We as mediators do not need to be directing them, to be pushing them in any direction. They will be empowered to make their own decisions because they will be able to hear each other, and they will be in a better state of mind, not completely self-absorbed, but able to see the bigger picture, again, what we've been talking about this evening. And that's the premise of transformative mediation. I really like it because I can apply it in the boardroom, I can apply it in the family situation. It's about not micromanaging, it's about being much more of a helicopter, if you like, of being over the top and enabling people to, just helping them to be a guide or a mentor or a coach rather than someone that's driving the process. Does that make sense? Anybody's got any questions on transformative mediation?
Excellent. Thank you very much, Jane. It is the first time I fully understand what is transformative mediation. I confess.
It's challenging, and I think many people, they hear the word transformative and it sounds a bit fluffy, if you like. It sounds as though, you know, we are trying to transform parties in a psychological way, to sort of be better people or whatever, or to be in a better relationship. It isn't about that at all. It's transforming the relationship between them in the moment so that they're better empowered. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Jane. Thank you. Sergio, are there other questions? Are there other questions?
There is a comment on Facebook from Mr. Evangelon Asiou. He says that mediation is a form of negotiation, and negotiation is everywhere in life, and therefore mediation is also everywhere in our life.
Yes. Thank you, Sergio. I completely agree, and this is again the place where the book that I mentioned, you know, the new book on reframing mediation comes from, is actually what we are all doing all the time is negotiating. And if we have better negotiation skills and understand those better, then we're better placed to have many of these, what we call difficult or challenging conversations in lives, but even more particularly in the workplace right now.
So I have something to ask you, Jane, for I remember very well at the end of the seminar we had organized in Athens about advanced mediation. We had another seminar for advanced mediation in Paris, you remember?
Yes, yes, we do. Yes.
And in Athens, it was 2 years later.
Yes.
So I remember that at the end of the seminar, you have read a poem for us. Do you remember it?
I do.
Which was?
To Dance.
Can you please read it for us, or even better?
Trying to think where it is. Give me a moment. I mostly remember it by heart, but let me just, I think I've got it here somewhere. If I very quickly look, I can find it for you. Yes, thank you for remembering that, Catherine. Let me find it. I'm pretty sure I can find it for you and read it. It's one of my favorite poems, and while I find it, let me tell you the story. So right at the beginning of my mediation career, I went to speak. I was very, very lucky that I went to speak in at a conference in New Zealand for LEADER, lawyers engaged in ADR. And at that conference, I met the author of To Dance. I'm just trying to remember his name now because I'm also looking at the ST2, The Dance of Mediation. There it is. There it is. I think it's here. So it's written by Dudley Weeks. And Dudley Weeks wrote this book called So Far to Go When We Get There. Dudley Weeks is a mediator. He's a mediator who's worked in former Yugoslavia, South Africa, other areas, Northern Ireland. He's somebody who's worked in many different areas, and his work has taken him into very dangerous places. Anyway, he wrote this poem. And I wrote, again, I can let you have this. I wrote a blog, Catherine, called The Dance of Mediation, because I think mediation is like a dance. And this is what I wrote. You know, you can go in with the skills that you have, but you have to listen to the parties and you have to move with them on their level, whether that's anger, frustration, or indignation, empathizing and understanding them, whatever their mood is. You've got to be in tune with your parties. You've got to be able to dance them, and you have to be able to understand. So thinking about being in terms of mediation as a dance, you've got to get them to trust you and to take the rhythm you've got going for the mediation. And if you're not willing to dance with them, they're not going to trust you. They'll only play your tune later. You've got to dance with them to their tune. And I think that's the kind of movement I'm thinking about in understanding how mediation works. So then I talked about Dudley Weeks and his poem, which has really inspired me. To Dance. If I had it all to do again, and we never have it all to do again, but if I did have it all to go again, I'd take much more time to dance. Dance, you say? Who needs ballet? Who needs to move and sway that way? That's not dancing, just moving that way. When you celebrate each day, that's dancing, I say. When you dare to be you, that's when you dance. When you fall and get up, that's when you dance. When you can laugh at yourself, that's when you dance. When you enrich someone's life, then you have danced. For dancing is feeling that whatever place you're in can be made into a place where hope can begin. Dancing is reaching again and again for the best that's in you. That's dancing, my friend. And I really like that, because I think it's talking to me about this sense of, it is about us. It's about us as mediators. It's about us finding the best that's in us and bringing that to our clients and that to the world. So thank you for reminding me about that, Catherine.
Thank you very much. And wonderful, wonderful.
It is my favorite poem. I have it framed on my bedroom wall, actually, because I love to dance as well.
Could you please send it to us?
I will send it to you, and also you will find, if you access the mini videos that I've sent you, I'm reciting it there. It's one of the videos in that section. See, there is a whole video on dancing as well.
Fine, excellent.
Yeah. So I must remember what I've promised you, Catherine. I've promised you various things, but we must, I'll make sure I can send you, if you'd like, I can send you a PDF of the slides so that you've got that. And I can send a link to, I do have blogs and podcasts that if people are interested to listen to, they can link to. And by the way, if anybody can connect with me on LinkedIn, I do post almost every day on LinkedIn a blog. So I'm happy for you to link with me on Facebook, but more particularly on LinkedIn, because I do post some thoughts almost every day on LinkedIn. So it would be really nice to link with people. I know I'm linked to several people already, but that would be wonderful. It's a good way.
Perfect. Thank you. Perfect. Yeah. Thank you. Jane, before we finish this pleasant event, I would like to tell you that among the audience, we have the honor to have the president of the committee of the Ministry of Justice, which is in charge of answering the questions the mediators put. And Mr. Kyriakos Ikonomou is with us. He's following with pleasure, and we are very proud to have him with us. And I must tell you that we do a very good job at the ministry answering various questions which have arisen after the new law, which was put into effect in 2019, at the end of 2019, and which is quite new because it has introduced a mandatory first session of mediation in various cases.
Yes.
So,
well, I'm completely honoured that I'm completely honoured to have the Minister of Justice here in this event. Thank you so much for taking the time to come.
2 words, please. May I say something?
Yes,
of course. Of course.
Mr. Gunn, I want to thank you very much for your excellent presentation. You made me to estimate mediation more and more. I think that brilliant persons as you lead mediation to broader and effective ways. Thank you very much again.
Thank you so much. A real honor. Thank you.
Κύριε Πρόεδρε, ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ που μας παρακολουθείτε, μας εμψυχώνετε και μας δίνετε κουράγιο για να συνεχίσουμε.
Δική μου είναι η τιμή και η ευχαρίστηση.
Να είστε καλά και να μας παρακολουθείτε πάντοτε. Σέργε.
Δεν έχουμε άλλες ερωτήσεις, οπότε μπορούμε να πάμε στην αποφώνηση.
Ωραία. Jane, once again, thank you very, very much for your presentation. I am delighted to have had the opportunity to see you again, even through Zoom.
I know, me too.
I look forward to see you again in London, in Athens, in Paris, or anywhere where we can be looking to each other.
Yes. Absolutely, because usually we would go to a nice restaurant now and have dinner with me. That would be wonderful. If there's anything I can do to help anybody on this call, please feel free to send me a message. My website is janegunn.co.uk. My email jane@janegunn.co.uk. I'm very happy to continue the conversation to help anybody. I'll send the resources to Catherine, and please just keep in touch. It's such an important time, I think, for us as mediators.